Hey everybody, Steve Farmer back once again bringing you games from the 2012 Ye Olde Pueblo Open. Now I'm going to bring you 3 game fragments in this video, and then we will have 2 full games from round 3 later on. There were a lot of draws in this round, and I can understand that. It's the Saturday evening round, so I know the players are a little bit tired from the first 2 rounds and need a break. So, to give some justice to Matt Noble, who ended up tying for second place, I believe, the first video we saw of him was a loss in short order to Ken Larson, and then we saw his game against Dallas Elkins, which was really that bizarre, out-of-this-world game. So, I want to give credit back to Matt, because he does play good chess. And here, in round 3, we start the classic time control, where at move 40 they get extra time. So it's not a sudden death type situation. Alright, Matt is rated 1997, and he's playing white, and he's playing Ethan Z at 1879. And Ethan is on the move here. And if he would now play rook to d8, after knight takes c4, b takes c4, white's got a piece and a pawn for the exchange. But it looks pretty level. I think black can hold this with not too great of difficulty. It's not going to be simple, but it's not that difficult either. But going back, he played bishop takes d5 here. And this was the losing mistake of the game. Now it's up to Matt to find the winning continuation. Well, of course he's going to take the bishop. That's not what I'm talking about. The winning plan, let's put it that way. But he has time now. He's not having to make all his moves in a certain amount of time. He has the luxury of thinking things through. And of course he takes the bishop. And now King f8 was played, and it is interesting that someone wrote on the score sheet after this move an equal symbol. This position is far from equal. Black's just lost. Matt plays knight to c4. Hitting that pawn on e5, so he has to protect it, and then knight to d6. Ethan doesn't like that knight there, so he plays a rook to d8, knight takes b5. Alright, we now have nominal material equality, but these passed pawns by white are just too dangerous. They're too much to overcome. Ethan tried rook c to c8, now c4, king to e7, and rook to a1 was played. Fortunately for Matt, there's a lot of roads that lead to Rome in this position here. c7 also works. So after rook to d7, you can play rook to d1. Now he can't take that pawn on c7, sacrifice back the material, because d6 at the end wins more material. So, yeah, just some ideas of some play. And black is just all bottled up here. But going back to the game, Matt's continuation is just fine. Rook to a1 works as well. Rook to a8. Now he flicks in the check. King to f7, rook to a7 check. And now king to f8 was played. Taking the rook doesn't help any, because after he takes this pawn, we can just push and he can't stop the promotion. And if he goes to a8, we just go to c7. If he takes the knight, we promote. So that's why Ethan played king to f8, but it's all over after c7. Rook d to c8, d7, king to e7, rook takes rook, and then c8 equals queen, and black resigned. So with more time, actually, they didn't even reach the first time control, but they had more time at their disposal. So he could run it down to just a couple minutes knowing he'll get more time. But in the game in 90, it's a completely different ball of wax. He had more time to play cautiously, properly, and see things through. Our next game fragment comes from the open section as well. This is Ricky Sun playing white at the top. He's rated 1722, and he's playing James Chaffin with the black pieces at 1749. In this position, black is on the move. And we have a very classic ending here. We have a bad bishop, a really, really, really bad bishop versus a knight. Black is winning, easily winning, if he handles it in the right manner. If you were playing black, what would you play here? Pause the video and think this one through, because it's a very critical idea that black needs to know in this kind of position. Alright, well, I'm hoping that you stopped the video and that you did look for a solution to this. The main thing that you got to do is to really make sure that that bishop of white's remains a bad bishop forever. And you need to play h5. And it blocks out any pawn lever from white. And this will be critical, as we'll see in a moment. In the game, he played knight takes a3. And after bishop takes knight, king takes, he just automatically played king to c3. Let's step back for a moment. And we're going to flip the board. White to play. What is the best idea for white here to try and hold the game? He's in very dire straits. That a pawn is very close to promoting, and it's just going to take 4 moves. Get the king out of the way and 3 squares to promote, 4 moves. So what can white do here? Pause the video and see what you can come up with. Okay, I'm pretty sure that you probably stumbled onto the right idea because I showed you what he played and I told you that was not the right move. So that would just basically leave ideas like king c2, which is rather stupid. And the other move, of course, is g4. And that's what he should have tried. Now, just count the squares. All right, we know it takes black 4 moves, right? So what about white? Take all of the possible variations that black could play here. If he makes a pawn move, it doesn't change the difference for his a pawn to get to a1. It's still going to take 4 moves. So you take any pawn captures and you just cross them out. So let's first look at not taking any pawn captures at all. Alright, by black. So white would then have 1, 2, 3, 4 moves to promote as well. I hope this clears things up a little when you're trying to make a calculation from back here before we play g4. Okay, let's throw in g4 here. Just get rid of these arrows. Alright, so what happens if trades are made here? What if he takes here? Well, again, it does not change the 4 moves needed to advance the a pawn to a1. So we play f5. It's still 4 moves. Now if he goes g3, this is about the only thing that you really would need to calculate. In this case, you do need to bring the king over to slow that pawn up. And now, if he goes g2, well, we just go king f2. And, I mean, trying to get here, this is a trick you have to remember in king and pawn endings. He will want to get his pawn to promote with check, and that's the idea of luring the white king to this square. But I think white comes out of it okay. After fe6, and then promotes, but promotes with check. But the key thing here for white is that he does not bring the king up to the 4th rank. Because if he did, he'd lose the d-pawn with check. Now the thing is that in this situation, white is just a tiny bit closer with this pawn to promoting than black is with either of these. So while black could grab the d-pawn of white, that's going to put the white pawn even 1 more square further to promotion. So I think that black has to be very careful and not grab that pawn and just keep giving checks, which would be a draw. Now back here after king to e2, we just look at the idea of g2, and it's probably the best line for white, but you still want to calculate the other lines that are possible. And that would be like king to b3, going forward with the promotion of the pawn. Now we take here, a3. It doesn't matter. If he takes on f5 first, and we push, it comes to the same thing. And we promote, and he promotes, but the trick here is that white can now force a perpetual. because the king goes here, and then we check. He has no way to come further to the right, so he has to go back, check. And the bad thing for him is if he goes king to a3, we can force a trade of queens, and now it's white who is winning. Black won't be able to promote, but white will. So going after king c3, queen c5, it's just going to be a draw by perpetual. Alright, so going back to our original position here, you can look at this and say g4 is the move. That's why, all the way back here at the beginning of this introduction to this fragment, h5 was the critical move. Because all of the winning lines then just lock into place for black. Right, so let's flip the board, catch up to where we were, and white played king to c3 here, and that allows h5, a tempo burner, and gaining the opposition after king to c2, king to b4, and white resigned. Our third and final game fragment from round 3 comes from the game of Victor Valenzuela at 1293, playing Gary Payne, who's rated 1483, and this is from the reserve section. Gary's a friend of mine, but he's really had a bad couple tournaments here. He's capable of much better chess than this. In this position, it is white to move, and here he played d6, which is a bit impatient. Let's take a step back, though. I think bishop to b5 is a better idea. Well, first we hit the queen. Where does the queen have to go? There's really only one move. Queen to f8. And now bishop to c6. We're threatening to come in with knight to b5 and then bishop to d6. So, since that's the threat, he's got to do something to parry it. Now, if he tries bishop takes c6, we take with the pawn, knight to b8, rook takes rook, queen takes c7. That pawn is protected by the bishop on f4, and after queen to c8, we pick off the knight, promote. Now, white's up a rook for a pawn. Alright, going back to here after we just played bishop to c6 for white, if he doesn't try and prevent knight to b5, say he just plays rook a b8, well, now knight to b5. As I mentioned, bishop to d6 now is a very nasty threat. Example, a6, bishop to d6, a b5, bishop takes f8. Yeah, the queen has nowhere to go. So it's all over after this move. I mean, you can try knight takes d5 so that after bishop takes d5, well, if we go bishop to d6, I guess that works as well, huh? Yeah, let's take a look. Bishop to d6. Well, I guess he could take on c6 and then get at least some material for it. So he's got two bishops and a pawn for the queen. Still winning for white, but it looks like bishop takes d5 is a more clear way to go. And go this way. And black is still going to lose the queen. Yeah, this is much better for white. Alright, so at move 16, when the players should have had plenty of time, he rushed in with d6 instead of bishop b5. Alright, we're going to go quickly through some of these moves here. I could go into detail on improvements like bishop takes f3 is better for black here. White's still better, but it's a better move. Bishop to g5, and again he should trade on f3. He does not, because now the reason he needed to trade on f3 is knight to e5 is a crusher. All this pressure on the f7 square. And Gary must have thought for a long time here, and he decided to give up the exchange with rook to d7. The pressure is just too great on black. If he does not play rook to d7, he's going to come under a pretty strong attack. For example, if he tried rook takes d6, bishop takes with check, king h8, and now the move I like, bishop takes g6. And it can't be taken because of this, forking the king and queen. So rook takes d1, and queen takes d1. And now black's faced with another problem. What does he do with that knight on h5? It's a goner. Yeah, so knight to e5 forced black to think for a while and come up with rook to d7, which is the best defense, really. knight takes, and now rook to e7. And poor Gary, things keep going from bad to worse. Now, if he tries bishop to c6, he didn't play this in the game, but if he tries this, it's going to be met with rook takes f7. Now, we're threatening a nasty discover check, and we can pick up the knight here. And black is down a full rook and a pawn. So, yeah, very easily winning for white. In the game, he tried knight to e5, and rook takes b7. Things have gone from bad to worse to, oh my god, I'm going to be sick. Takes the bishop. So he's down just the exchange in this line, but I think that white missed a good winning line here. In the game, he played knight to e4. But there was a more solid way to win, I think. Bishop to e7 was better. To queen to e8, queen to e4. Now, if knight to e5, g4 is just going to pick off that knight, or a piece. So if he goes knight to f6, queen takes e5. And if knight to a5, well, d7 is just a winner, straight out and simple. And if knight takes d6, bishop takes, queen takes, knight takes. He's down a rook for a pawn. So, white is still winning, but there are cleaner ways to get the job done. Knight to e4 was played, knight e5, f4, knight c6, and now g4. Whoa, baby. And this is exactly what I'm talking about. White is completely winning, but taking the attitude that anything wins gets him in trouble. That was a bad mistake. Should have tried queen to a4, hitting the knight. Bishop d4 check, king moves, knight to a5. Now rook to c7. Bishop takes on b2. Bishop to e7. Queen to b8. And now pawn up. And if he takes, we promote. He takes, we take. And now probably the best is to play queen takes, bishop takes. White is up a queen for a piece and two pawns. And if he goes king to g7, well, that doesn't help too much. Here's a nice little quiz for you. Pause the video. Find the winning continuation for white. How does white win this game, basically, in just a couple moves? Okay, did you pause the video? I'm sure you didn't get the right answer. Pause it again. Okay, I'll stop being a wise ass. The move is rook to g8. Isn't that nice? It's just a deflection to bring the king to a worse square. Because if he goes king to h6, the only other square he can go to other than taking rook, this is checkmate. So he has to take the rook, and now what? Well, yeah, queen checks on e8. King to g7, and now queen to f8 is mate. When I first spotted the rook to g8 pattern, I was thinking that he had to play bishop f8, king goes back to g or h8, and then bishop h6, mating in that manner. But yeah, just stumbled on it. This is mate. Nice little pattern there to remember. Alright, so he had better. He played g4, and now Gary plays bishop d4 check. And I think that Gary really wasn't even looking for any trend reversals whatsoever in this position. But you always need to be looking for trend reversals. Your opponent's not going to play a perfect game. Not from start to finish. Not from even gaining a winning advantage to the finish. In many cases. So, even though you may be beaten like a red-headed stepchild, you really need to look and see if there are any opportunities there. And in this case, there happens to be. Can you spot the defense for black? Tell you what. Let's flip the board and make it a little easier for you. Is there anything black can do to fight his way back into the game? Okay, I hope you stopped this one and took a look, and I hope that you found queen to c8. Hits the rook, and it also hits this pawn on g4. Now, if rook to c7, the most obvious reply, we take king to f1, bishop d4, and now if he plays rook takes c6, black gets out of this with a perpetual. And if white does not take the knight on c6, then we have a position where white is the exchange up, but black's got a pawn for it. And he's got an exposed king for white to go hunting after. Yeah, this is actually not a bad position for black. So if we go back after queen c8, it's probably best to take on h5 for white. And then after queen takes on b7, throw in d7. But here, bishop d4 check forces white to give up the exchange. Rook takes, knight takes, queen to g2. And oddly, now it's white who is down the exchange. But he looks to be getting that back. If he can protect that pawn on d7 and promote it, he'll get the exchange back. But it's a game. White's probably a bit better. I think I would prefer white, but it's not a clear win for either side. It's a fight. And this is a far cry from what happens in the game. Alright, so after white's mistake with g4, let's flip the board once again. A reciprocal mistake with bishop to d4, and now king to g2, leaving the door open. He should play rook takes d4, just straight away. So what? Knight takes d4, queen to c4. And now, if knight f3, and king comes up, and he can take the bishop, and we can take here, and the knight retreats. But then we have knight f6 check, king to h8, and now queen takes f7. And it's clear that white is in complete control. He's only up a pawn in this line, but that pawn is a far advanced d pawn. Very good winning chances for white. In the game, he played king to g2. Okay, they're at move 26, so maybe they were in some time pressure, but black again missed queen to c8. It still worked in this position. He played knight to g7, and now a3 was played, which is a mistake. He should play rook to c7, and after knight to b4, queen to b3, knight to e6, blocking the attack on that f-pawn. But now we take on d4. He can take on c7, but we can flick in bishop to e7. You got to keep finding a way to protect that pawn. And look at this, there's so many pieces hanging all over the board. And now if queen to c8, we have d7 hitting the queen, cd4, take, knight to d6, and it's all over for black. So queen c8 is just obviously not the move. He has to go all the way back to b8. But now we have knight to f6 check, king to g7, pawn takes, we're hitting the queen takes, now rook to d7. And white maintains a material edge. He's up a piece for a pawn, and he maintains the attack and domination of the dark squares around the enemy king. So surely this game will not go on too much longer. But back in our game, he played a3, and now knight to e6. And black is back in the game. He's down the exchange, but he's within striking distance, so he's still in the game. d7 was played, and now, again, let's flip the board. It's black to play. Okay, in the game, Gary played f6. It seems to make some sense, but it's not the correct move. When you look at a position like this, okay, your opponent's got the pawn on d7. But the nice thing that you got going for you is you got your knight on e6 and you got your knight on c6, eyeing the d8 square. You have your bishop on d4, preventing the rook on d1 from protecting the d-pawn. And the only bad things in your position here, realistically speaking, is that rook on b7. Well, yeah, you do have some weak squares on the king side, but you still have your bishop on d4 that can pop back if you need to. So the most obvious thing to me would be to play rook to b8. And I think that after this, white really needs to lash out in some really proactive way. If he tries rook takes b8, queen takes b8, queen to c4, we can now play knight c to d8. And if king to g3, we can take on b2. And if b4, we play queen to b7, pinning that knight. And now we're threatening to take on g4. And just have a solid game. White's a bit better here, but he's not winning. So rook takes b8 is one way to go for white. And then rook takes d4 is probably the most proactive way to handle this position. And after knight c takes d4, knight f6 check, king to g7, and now knight e8 check. But let's step back. Probably for white, the best way to go here is queen to e4. And after rook takes, queen takes h6, knight to e8 check, king to h7, bishop f6, knight takes f4, king g3, knight d to e6. White's probably still winning here, but it's still a fight. It's a bit of a fight here. It's not an easy gimme situation. Yeah, but obviously you'd want white. And if he goes knight to e8 check here, which would probably be the most logical candidate move, then rook takes. And now if he takes and promotes to a queen, this is not good. But let's come back to that in a moment. The thing that he should do is take here and promote to a knight with check. And this should keep the winning chances alive for white. After queen takes, queen to e4, queen to c6, take, and king to f3. Yeah, white's still up the exchange. Black's got a pawn for the exchange. But the white rook on b7 is now becoming a more prominent feature of this endgame, now that the queens are off the board. But going back here, if he takes and promotes to a queen, that changes things quite a bit. Because first, we flick in knight takes f4. Yeah, if we went queen takes, he'd go queen to e4, and we're seeing all those similar lines pop up once more. So knight takes f4, bishop takes, and now queen takes, queen on e8. And look at this. The queen on c2 is hit. It would be nice to bring the queen somewhere so that when black checks on that diagonal, the h1a8 diagonal, he'll be able to block with the queen, but he can't. The f3 square would be the prime candidate square for that, but the knight covers that square. Okay, I can best equate this to like a UFC bout, where the guys are pressed up against the cage, and you got to get involved in some dirty fighting. If you have a good dirty fighting game, you can find a lot of defenses like this and pull out a lot of wins from lost positions. Now here, the queen has to move, so let's just go ahead and follow this out a little bit. Queen moves, and then we check, and then boom. And look at this. Black is up 2 pawns now, and should be completely winning. And the queen and the knight are a very dangerous combination. So, yeah, black has every reason to play on here for the win. Let's go back to the game position. Let me flip the board. Okay, even though that line had some lines in there where white could play more accurately, you're getting closer and closer and closer to the time control. And the closer you get to time control, most often is when your opponents are becoming more short of time. So that complicated line that we just looked at had chances for black to win if white didn't play absolutely accurately. I mean, like the trading on e8 and promoting to a knight with check to win. Who's going to really see that in time pressure? Most likely they're going to take and promote to a queen, thinking that you have to recapture right away. That wasn't the case, because black was able to flick in that move, knight takes f4. That gave him chances to turn the tables and win the game. So you always want to complicate, and complicating does not necessarily mean moves on the board. It could mean making a more critical situation in a time pressure situation. And that was probably the case here. In this game, though, he played f6, and after queen to b3, queen to e7. Now, white should just go ahead and promote here. He didn't. He played bishop h6. But let's take a look at promotion. All right, couple choices here. Knight takes, queen takes, rook takes. Let's look at queen takes first. Well, now we can take this knight, so this doesn't look too good. Yeah, so bishop takes, and then rook takes. Rook takes queen f6, and it's all over. And back here, if he plays queen takes on f6 here, we take with the knight. We're threatening mate with rook takes h7, so he's got a block. Now we take here, and mate's coming. Can't stop it. So after promoting, queen takes d8 can be ruled out. Rook takes d8, what about that one? Well, we just get the queen. And we get this. So yeah, that doesn't work. So knight c takes d8. Rook takes queen. Pawn takes. Rook takes. Yeah, this is just all over. So here, instead of bishop h6, promoting was the way to go. Black just has too many loose pieces in this position to keep on fighting. Bishop h6. Now, black should play knight c to d8. That would make the win harder for white. And remember, we're still working on the idea of complicating in a time pressure situation. So knight c d8 would have made things tougher. White's still winning, yes, but tougher. Instead, he plays king h8. And then he promotes to rook. And I'm very proud of everybody in these last two tournaments for under-promoting. This is probably just based on practical reasons that the queens are still on the board, so he just used a rook from the neighboring board. Queen takes, now queen takes e6. And now mate is inevitable. It's coming in just a few moves. So Gary, playing the black pieces, decided to resign at this point at move 32. Didn't even make it to time control. So maybe Gary was the one short on time and didn't see all those things. Who knows? I wasn't there watching the game. But I just thought it was an interesting game because there were some really cool tactics in there, and I hope you found it entertaining. I hope you found all three of these games entertaining. And it was good to give Matt Noble some credit after seeing his first two games to show that he knows how to play chess. That's it for now, folks. I'll be bringing two more games, full games, later on. So stay tuned for those, and until next time, good luck.